started looking around in society and realizing so many people had so much, but didn't appreciate hardly any of it. So I said, how do I appreciate having very little, but being in love with my life? So I decided to take a journey where I went and lived in a village over in Uganda, like I mentioned. In this village, you had to walk a quarter mile to a water well pump to pump water into a jerry can to carry all the way back to where you're living, to then pour into a pot, to then boil just to have drinking water. And you had to let it cool before it was ready every day. And I realized this is how most people were living. But something magical happened while I was here that changed my whole perspective. And here's what it was. Every morning, this was where I lived, there was my hospital cot, and there was a window next to it. Every morning I woke up and pushed open these shutters right there, and I'd watch the sunrise, the most beautiful thing, the sunrise over the landscape and out of that window. It was beautiful. And every single morning when I woke up and watched the sunrise, there was this little old man that would start off at the front doorstep of the clinic right out my window, and he would inch his way down this path, clearing the leaves. He'd go all the way down the path, he'd get to the main road at the end, turn around and work his way all the way back. And every single morning, he did it. About 30 days in, I got so curious about this guy. I'm like, I want to know why he does it. So I went over there and I found someone to translate, and I asked them, I said, ask the man, why do you do what you do? And she looked at me and looked at him and said something, and he said something back, and she says, because I'm supposed to. When us Americans travel, we tend to think if they don't understand us in another language, we must not have been speaking loud enough. So I said, no, why do you do that? And the lady looked at me like, really? She looked at me and thought for a second and then looked at him and said something. And he, all of a sudden, without even speaking the language, I saw the effect I was looking for. And the effect was he went, and I was like, I don't know what he said, but that's what I'm looking for. Like that piece, the joy, the excitement, the passion behind it. Like, what was that? And she said, the reason, he said, this is interesting. And she said, the reason I do what I do from him, the reason I do what I do is I believe every human being, whether it's a small child about to enter this world or a sick or elderly person about to leave this world, deserves a clear path to do so. And I was shocked because I met someone that did something so simple, that had such depth of meaning behind it. I met a man who was living his passion and changing the world in his own way simply by sweeping leaves. And I remember standing there and being in awe, thinking if I wanted to change the world, if I wanted to inspire millions, if I wanted to do all these huge things, it had to be this big, huge, giant thing. Until I realized the second lesson was learning to find deep purpose and meaning in all that you do, especially the small stuff. Because this man lived in a village with no running water, no electricity, no toilets. He was in his 80s, and he lived the most purpose-filled life of anyone I've ever met by doing little things in service to the community around him and finding deep meaning and purpose in it. While I was there, I got another lesson. This one not as nice. If you know what this is, those are blood cells, and while I was in this village, I had one of these guys land and lay this in my blood. What happens is those are eggs inside of those cells, and every 8 to 10 hours they hatch and do this to the cell. Eesh, not good. And by the time I made it to the doctor, I was stubborn, saying, I believe in holistic medicine. I'm not going to touch your medicine. Leave me alone. I'll be fine. They said, you have about 4 to 5 days to live. And if you've ever been told that, it's a moment that'll shake your soul. Because you look around at everything you wanted to do with your life, everything you ever dreamed of, everything you ever desired, and all of a sudden in a moment you realize a really big lesson. We're not promised anything past this moment. Today, this moment, right now. There's no promise that you won't walk out of the street and get run over by a bus. There's no promise that that won't happen. There's no promise. So I started going back and saying, if I learn how to work hard, if I learn how to fall in love with life, even if I only have a little, and I learn how to do it now, what's the only piece I'm missing? I said, well, at this moment in my life, the only piece I was missing was the vision of the life I really wanted to live. So I went back to the fourth lesson. I think that if this is shared and this is lived and this is give and shared around the world, where you really not only just learn it today, but you find a way to live it and you find a way to give it, I think this philosophy might change the world. Super simple. And the final lesson I learned was really taking a moment to define and then live the life of your dreams. Because if you know what the life of your dreams looks like, and you're willing to work hard to get there, you're willing to fall in love with every single moment along the journey, and you're willing to put meaning to all those pieces, not only that, but to do it now, you can turn that dream life into real life.